Hey guys, this is Dr. Shiloh. Welcome to episode 3 of LA Not So Confidential. I'm here with Dr. Scott.
Hey guys.
And we are going to focus on the Netflix show Mindhunters today. So
Yes.
Hopefully everyone's caught up on it. If not, do that before you listen to the rest, because we're going to just talk about the season and our impressions and how it relates to the work that we've done. But first, I hope you can realize that we have new equipment.
Yeah, we invested in some real equipment, so we're hoping it works.
We did. We have heard you loud and clear, and now hopefully you can hear us loud and clear.
Oh, speaking, if anybody decided to download this and you gave up on episode 2, please go back and give it a try. I was able to rejigger some stuff and we re-uploaded it.
Excellent.
So,
yes, we did. It should be fine-tuned a bit, so it's tolerable.
Yeah, this is better, I think.
Yeah, this is going to be better. So, how was your week?
It was really good. It was a little interesting. Something happened as a result of this. Our new hobby. A friend of mine, a colleague that I used to work with at the county jail, has a side business where she has this business where people can log in to a website and find out through audio files about their medications that they're taking. So she hired me to do voiceovers.
No.
Which I know. I'm really surprised because I think I sound like I hate my voice. I think I sound like a gay penguin from Alabama, but maybe
I was going to say everyone hates their voice, but I don't think they think that.
It worked for me somehow, so I must be doing something right. But it's weird because I had 7 different medications, and I had to sit in front of this microphone and sit in front of the computer and say things like, "Deniazine may cause rectal bleeding."
Lovely. How many takes?
I know. I was laughing at the whole thing. Call your doctor immediately if you have purple pustules.
Oh dear God.
It was just awful. But it was kind of fun, and I got a little extra scratch. So I'm not going to complain.
Psychologists always have 25 jobs.
I know. What is up with that?
Her with that business, her hiring you to do voiceovers.
I know. And probably because we all have student loans that we'll be paying till we're 85 years old.
There's that too. When I did my background investigation for this latest job, my background investigator, she goes, "You have a lot of jobs." I'm like, "Yeah, we pretty much all do. Sorry."
Okay, well, the look you just shot me imitating her face was like...
Oh, she was dead serious.
She was looking at you like you were...
wrong with me.
Yeah, like you were really sketchy.
Yes.
Like they don't put us through enough hell. I mean, when I went through when I was briefly a law enforcement psychologist, I almost quit the process because the background check was so lengthy, because the agency I went for was different from the agency you worked for, and I was given the background check that the officers go through. And
the full
I've got
shebang.
2.5 extra decades on top of people going in.
Yeah, and that's what I was expecting. I mean, I've been through numerous of those types of background checks, but
we'll never be able to kill anybody. Because our fingerprints are in every database. Yep. So
yeah, we can't.
Yeah.
Wear latex
I'm not going to
gloves.
get away with anybody. What's the secret? If you're going to kill somebody, it has to be unconnected.
That's right.
Can't be connected.
That's right. So Mindhunter is based on a book that John Douglas put out in early 2000s. It kind of starts off as more biographical and covers his 25-year career with the FBI, and especially in developing criminal profiling and this journey he took interviewing serial killers in prisons to gather research, and didn't really know what they were going to do with it in the beginning. But eventually, with some of his partners and some other individuals associated with academia, turned it into another book. John Douglas's book is called Mindhunter Inside the FBI's Elite Serial Crime Unit, and then they ended up publishing the information from essentially the 10-year project of interviewing these criminals in prison. That's called the Crime Classification Manual. And that came out actually earlier than John Douglas's book in the the 90s, but it was won all kinds of accolades for being a big contributor to sort of law enforcement intelligence. And so that book, if anyone wants to look it up, and I'll throw it up on the web page as well, is written by John Douglas, Ann Burgess, Alan Burgess, and then Robert Ressler. Robert Ressler, who essentially is the other agent that did a lot of the interviewing with John Douglas. So
I'm jumping just a little bit ahead, but I wanted to ask you: is the female psychologist character, was that a real person, or is that an amalgam of people?
No, it's essentially Ann Burgess. So once they, I believe she's a psychiatric nurse with a doctorate. So it's not exactly the same as how it's portrayed in the show, because she's a psychologist.
Yeah, in the show they portray her as a psychologist.
Right. There's definitely parallels, and I think that's who it's supposed to be. But the Mindhunter season 1 has been out on Netflix for a couple of weeks now, and I just, I dove into the book in college because it kind of helped me figure out what I wanted to do when I was studying criminal justice and psychology. And I read it multiple times, as well as all of John Douglas's other books that he ended up putting out, looking at some more modern cases too. But it really stuck out to me as something that I found super interesting, and was kind of one of those milestones of my true crime fascination.
Oh, cool.
So it was really, when I saw the trailer for this, I was super stoked that it was coming out, especially all these years later, and kind of reflecting on how my career has been, since I first picked up that book. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty impressed. I'm impressed.
What are your overall thoughts about the show?
I straddle two worlds, because it takes me back to having worked in post-production and worked as a casting director, and my partner is a production designer for feature films. So I can't divorce myself from it,
mm-hmm.
but I was really happy to see that everything is pretty top notch. They capture the era absolutely perfectly, down to the selection of music. In fact, they must have spent a lot of money getting the rights to the music, because they picked some fantastic songs, and the sets, the costumes, everything is done to a T. The lighting is done to a T.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that stuff, but it just feels so authentic and has that kind of tinge to it.
Yeah.
Which is neat, because it's a dark show.
Yeah. But
So
even one of the
great.
things I noticed is that even when they're shooting, because a lot of it is shot in the, they had this horrible office in the basement of the FBI at Quantico, and then they're in, at that time was way before any of the new prisons were built
mm-hmm.
in California. So those they were in the old school, dank, moldy, mildewy prisons, and it looks like it.
Yeah.
But when they go outside into the sunlight, there's this sort of, tobacco-stained golden light that seems to emanate from everywhere. It really evokes a time period.
It does. It's neat.
Plus the fact that one of the lead characters is smoking all the time.
Constantly. Yeah. Even just like when because they travel to a bunch of different cities, and when they get to a new city, it kind of has the the font really big, to kind of tell you where they're at. And then there's a scene where the main character, Holden, meets his girlfriend in a club, and it's loud, and there's music playing, and you can't hear what they're saying, but there's subtitles.
Yeah, that was clever. That was really clever.
Little twists.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Did you pick up on, like, when they first showed it, that they're basically starting off every episode with BTK Killer?
No.
So he's the guy with the mustache and the glasses, and so he's a thread throughout the whole thing.
How did you know that was him?
Because it looks just like him, and it's always
in Kansas. Look like him. Oh, it's Kansas. Yeah. Oh, wow.
So it's...
Well, you know why? Because BTK coming up, we see him as a, over middle-aged man, very heavy set, whereas this guy is younger and...
Right.
But yeah.
It's kind of at the start of his killing.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's really cool.
On. I think even when John Douglas was originally doing these interviews, he talks to some serial killers about BTK and calls him BTK, but they haven't caught him yet. And he says, there's this person in Wichita, Kansas that is killing women and calls himself BTK and refers to him. It's kind of neat to see it all now. Now that he's been caught and we've heard. Well,
it's also great storytelling. That's a great narrative to have that weaving that through and having that continuous thread.
Right.
Because now, I watched the whole thing. I marathoned it and I had forgotten that part because
it starts off with him almost every episode, and then the very, very end is a closing scene with him. And
you usually see him very calm and methodical. And there's one scene where he just kind of has a meltdown and loses it. On his own, in a secluded area. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that actually refers back to he was waiting in a house for a victim to come home, and she didn't ever come home, and he got pissed.
Wow!
And left.
Okay.
So they figured that out later. Actually, they didn't show it in Mindhunter, but I think in real life, he actually left her a note, like, "Why didn't you come home?" or something like that, and then they ended up tying it together that it was him.
Yeah. So, what do you want to do today as far as what we're covering? Because that show, I hope. Do you feel like it's going to go for multi-seasons?
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine it not getting picked up. It's so good. So, how much from your reading the book? Because I didn't read the book,
right?
So, how does it cover a quarter? Does it cover a half or a third, or what would you say?
I would say it covers a third.
Okay.
Yeah, so they did
a couple of smaller crimes.
Right, a couple, like 3 other characters besides...
I shouldn't say smaller crimes. They were brutal murders, but they were one-off, where they were using their profiling skills.
Yes. It's not much, so they have a lot that they can work with. Plus, he wrote other multiple books all the way up until, cases like John Benet Ramsey.
I can't wait to do that. So basically, this season tends to focus on Ed Kemper and Jerry Brudos.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So for those of you, if by some chance you're watching the show, or you haven't watched the show, or haven't scheduled it yet, but you don't know who Ed Kemper is, just to give you a little bit of sort of a couple of bullet points. Ed Kemper is he's 68 years old now. He's a guy that was born in Burbank, California in 1948. He became known as the co-ed butcher, the co-ed killer, and he's an American serial killer. He abducted and murdered several women in the early 1970s, and as a teenager, he had murdered his paternal grandparents as well as his mother and a neighbor, one of his mother's friends.
Well, those were his last two. His mom and the friend.
Okay, after all the girls.
But the grandparents were the first.
And he engaged in some pathological behavior such as necrophilia, and at one point he claimed to have even consumed some of the flesh of his victims, so cannibalism. Although he recanted that later on, and he's as forward as he is about a lot of his things, to me, there's sown a few seeds of doubt because this is a person who really identified with law enforcement,
right?
And he was very invested in engaging them in friendships.
Yeah, he actually tested to be a CHP officer.
Yeah,
his mother had his record expunged because she said, "Oh, that pesky thing where you killed your grandparents, that might hold you back. Let's try and get this expunged."
That is mind blowing. I can understand, and even having worked in the jail system doing evals and seeing, as people are coming in and seeing a juvenile who has, breaking and entering, but they've got no other charges and no other.
Right.
Yeah, you expunge something like that, but expunging a double murder.
Which is its own interesting thing because she was so awful to him.
Yeah, she was a horrible person, obviously. This is definitely somebody that was probably started out with some bad wiring, and the parental situation made it a lot worse.
Yeah.
Made it a lot worse. But he went back and forth as a child between his parents. Like Shiloh was saying, his mother was incredibly abusive, and later sort of post-mortem forensically diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, as well as being a a pretty severe alcoholic. So it was not a good environment growing up for him. But he also met some of the same characteristics that Dahmer did, as far as injuring animals, experimenting with body parts, dismembering animal corpses, and had some really, violent tendencies as a child. Some that he acted on, and some that he fantasized about. And I think, it's another one of those things like, how did this slip through? How did he?
Well, and his comment after he killed his grandmother was, "I wondered what it was like, what it would be like to shoot grandma."
Yeah.
And then he knew he'd be caught by Grandpa, so he had to go too.
Yeah. Which was very just sort of practical on his end. What was fascinating to me about him, before we get into the story of how he interacts, and this is something, our field has come a long way in the past 2.5 decades. But, once again, there's a wide range of people that are competent at their jobs. And when when Ed Kemper he's born in 1948, so he murders his grandparents. He goes to court psychiatrist at the time when he was a teenager, diagnosed him as schizophrenia, paranoid type, which, you and I looking at that even on a superficial level would go,
right, because the hallmarks of that are going to be auditory visual hallucinations or some sort of
isolated
delusions.
behavior and, sort of negative symptomology as well, and which was great that was picked up as soon as he was incarcerated or he was put into the hospital. The social workers, the psychiatric staff there was like, no, this guy's not schizophrenic by any means at all. He's a psychopath. Right. But he's not that.
Right. Well, especially and so young.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare to be diagnosed with that at a mid, teen age.
Yeah.
So.
Especially, and he was also incredibly high functioning, had later tested with an IQ of 145, and was known to be like a great student. He was just always in this really vicious, abusive cycle with his mom.
Right.
And he was the victim of that abuse, even though he was 6'5", 300 pounds. I think even as a teenager, he was 6'5", and probably 220 pounds. And his mother was just a shrew.
Well, and then he gets put away and then let out in his early 20s and sort of missed that whole period of coming into sexuality and being able to be out with peers and age mates and experience that in a normal fashion. Yeah. So that sort of perfect storm came together, after he gets out of the psychiatric institution and is back home living with mom. And now she's working at a university and constantly telling him, you're never going to be with a girl like
you'll never accomplish anything. You'll never meet anybody. You're telling how awful he looked. And and once again, folks, we're not coddling this guy, but it's the idea that, you can really mess somebody up by the way you treat them.
Sure.
So he's the main character
he really
in these
is.
episodes. So what episodes is he sort of
mostly 2 through 5, I would say. He's the first serial killer they go to speak with just by happenstance because they're going to be in a nearby city.
So they hit the jackpot, right? Completely. I mean, they hit the jackpot with him because he's somebody that was invested in sharing his story.
Yeah. Yeah, he was more than willing to sit down and talk with them. I was really happy to see this because from the book, he was just this literal larger-than-life character. And so to kind of see him walk on screen was really cool to see him come alive in this show. And just made such an impression on me. I think out of every serial killer they talked to in that book, I always remembered Ed Kemper. Maybe it was because it was the first one. I don't know. But it was really neat to see it come to life on the show. And the actor is just so fantastic.
Yeah, he's amazing.
I mean...
because of my former life, I'm usually sitting watching television with my laptop open on IMDb, looking at who the actors are. Like, okay, who is this guy? Because he's really amazing, and what's he done before? And so then that leads into a rabbit hole of finding interviews with him. And he said that this role was so challenging, but he said he feels like it took him to another level of acting. That he immersed himself, and it was really that kind of frightens me. I hope you're not a method actor, but but the idea that he, came through on the other side and knowing what it challenge this was and is a better actor because of it. And he does a great job because you are drawn in the same way that Holden is drawn in, right?
Right, absolutely. He's this 6'7" guy, but you look at him, he looks like this little kid with these big glasses on, and
he speaks like a child. I mean, he has a very deep voice, but he talks in a manner that's very stilted. It kind of sounds like somebody who didn't really emotionally develop.
Exactly. Nice job.
Okay, thanks. And scene. But have you been, so a lot of what goes on in those episodes is we as the audience have the advantage. We're seeing more than the characters are seeing, and I have to give it to the way this storyline, this narrative is developed, is that not everything is given away, and the characters are not like these super beings that get everything from the beginning. We're really seeing them screw up.
Yeah, they're stumbling along the way. I mean, it feels reminiscent in a lot of ways.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
is like,
us coming into this.
We working together and getting snowed. Both of us got snowed.
Yeah, the first time that sort of happens is a big reality check. For me, coming from a law enforcement background, it was a huge shift to sit down with an offender and talk with them in a completely different way than I had before. So before, being primarily a patrol officer,
are you interrogating?
Well, I mean, preliminarily, yeah.
Okay.
So, I arrest them, bring them in, see what I can get out of them. But we're talking short period of time. I mean, I got to get back out there and do my job, right? So I'm trying to interview/interrogate them and get what I can out of them. And then detectives will follow up later. But if I can initially get it, great. But it's not a long period of time. I don't want them lying to me. I want to catch them in lies, that sort of thing. Whereas shifting to being a clinician,
right,
and having a different goal. They've already been punished for their crime. So my goal is to assess and treat so that they don't commit any future crimes.
Right.
It was a big shift for me. And I think, we've just had great supervisors and helping us along.
That goes without saying. Our supervisor for that was phenomenal. And my experience was coming really from a different end of the spectrum than you, because I came from before doctoral work, working as a marriage and family therapist, and really being trained intensely in developing therapeutic alliance,
right?
Not for the purposes of interrogation, but for the purposes of development and crisis resolution in working with individual clients and couples and families.
Yeah.
Where the goal is to really be present and be in the moment and meet them where they are. And I think so. That's great that I got that, but I did not have the skill set that you had on the other side, as far as like my radar really being attuned to the access to pathology, the criminality, and I remember our supervisor, who's probably still the best supervisor I've ever had.
Agreed.
Because she taught us,
right.
We were in a learning environment,
right.
But we were also supervised, which is, unfortunately, that's not consistent throughout the world. I mean, people are usually just thrown in to situations and kind of
just managed.
Yeah. And we were in a particularly, it was important that we were managed and supervised and given leading. And, I remember working with somebody that had already done his time, but he was going to be on lifetime supervision. I'll call him Gavin. I'll just make up a name. And, I worked with this guy twice a week for 6 months, and, I liked him. I knew everything about his life. I saw him in group. I saw him in individual. And, our supervisor was really, in our supervision meeting, to be able to say, Scott, you really like Gavin, don't you? And for her, it's not a bad thing. It's just remember where that boundary is, because you need to go back to looking at what got him in this place. Right. And then I had to, go back and look at the criminal file in the background and go, oh yeah, this guy had, over 50,000 images of child pornography and women being tortured. And even though he never had a hands-on offense, this is indicative of that there's some real pathology there.
Right.
And that he's also likely very invested in presenting well. where I was on guard. And later, when I worked in state prison, I got snowed a couple of times and I learned real quick, like, oh, okay, no.
I think I remember you coming into the intern office one day and just like, this guy's been lying to me, and I just figured it out, like, after all these months, and you were so defeated.
Duh. Yeah, what an idiot I was.
But when someone's likable, it's just sort of human nature to then believe what they have to say. And
or maybe that's endemic to Western culture.
True.
True. Like that's not so big in Asian cultures, or even like, I mean, that's a big thing. Like, what was something I was reading recently is that when you go to Russia, they tell you not to smile too much because no one wants to have anything to do with you. If you're they consider it creepy that the Americans smile so much.
Yeah, I think in the show, there's this point where Holden, the main character, kind of hears through the grapevine that Kemper may have said something bad about them. And he says, did Kemper call us idiots? That doesn't really sound like Ed to me. Like, how dare him? I know him.
He's my friend. Why would he say that?
He wouldn't say that. And so, I mean, it's that sort of thing. But sex offenders in general, and then, of course, we can extrapolate that, of course, to serial killers, but they're manipulative individuals.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole part of picking victims and grooming victims and being able to shape an environment where you can have somebody to victimize. So why wouldn't they be that way with their therapists and their probation officer and anyone else they're coming into contact with? Right. Well, that get them in trouble.
Faking it worked for them for many years before they got caught. I mean, there are some people that, there are some that I found interesting to work with that, from my MFT experience, I would immediately assume, oh, they're being so open with me. Mm-hmm. And that's another manipulation, though. It's this sort of, giving you, it's not necessarily just telling you what you want to hear, because they can weave in bits of the truth, which is that is very convincing.
Yeah. Yeah.
To create this thing, it's, becoming a chameleon to what they expect your expectations of them to be.
Sure.
And you just think, God, if you use that superpower or that supervillain power for good, you could kind of be amazing.
Right.
But unfortunately, it's not used in that way.
Very true. I like that Mindhunter does a really good job at showing how it really is this perfect kind of dance of, okay, you need to be genuine, be yourself, build rapport with this individual to elicit information, to get them to trust you enough to elicit information. But you still have to be vigilant enough to know when they're pulling one over on you and or not being genuine.
Right. And one of the things they do really well in the show is, in reality, who knows if there was really this sort of big difference between Holden and his partner.
Right.
But the way they've written it is they are two very different voices, where his partner is saying, as a seasoned cop, as a seasoned FBI agent, mm-hmm. you're going too far.
Right.
You're going too far. Why did you do? I mean, he really is the voice of reason, whereas Holden really represents. He's more impulsive. He is shooting from the hip, mm-hmm. and he's lucky/unlucky enough that that's worked for him so well for so long that he's been like this sort of golden boy.
Right.
But unfortunately, that doesn't work all the time, and it doesn't. Shooting from the hip, which then the psychologist character later mm-hmm. on mm-hmm. is able to show, no, we have to quantify everything we're doing. Right. And you can't just go off script, because then you're throwing off all the data that we're gathering.
But then that goes back to, they weren't getting anything out of people when they started out with that script. It was too cold. It wasn't... It was a snooze fest.
That's true. And like we said, that he was Kemper was a treasure trove of information because of his pathology. He was very open, despite being very manipulative. Right. But also they had the advantage that Kemper really identified with law enforcement. This was a guy that wanted to be a cop, and he was really bummed out that he couldn't be a cop. And in a way, it was probably like flipping a bird to his dead mom, that he was able okay, you know what, maybe I killed a bunch of people, but here I am. I'm around all the cops and law enforcement that I told you I was going to be with.
What career exhibits power and control more than that?
Exactly.
So, I mean, obviously a need that he was trying to meet.
At least through the application process. I think ultimately kept him from being a CHP was he was too tall.
It was.
He's 6'7" and he couldn't fit on the motorcycle. Which,
could you imagine?
But I find this fascinating. So in 1972, his juvenile records were permanently expunged, and the last report from his probation psychiatrist, this is a quote: "If I were to see this patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illnesses. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be of any danger to himself or to any member of society, and since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records."
I have so many feelings about that, because I think, what if I were in that person's place? And
with those people that we feel positive about that have been working with us for 3 or 4 years.
And I think it starts off well with, if I didn't know about the history, this is what I'm seeing in front of me. That's how I'm kind of reading through the lines, even though it's scary because this person makes a recommendation for it to be expunged so he can kind of live his future adult life clean. But really, we can assess what's in front of us and the past. But no matter how many assessments we do or tools we have, we can't predict the future either. I mean, people think that we are these, miracle workers where we can really predict future behavior, and we're not there.
So this makes me think, I think glad you framed it that way, because I want to present it in terms of the zeitgeist at that time. The idea that our forensics had not come to the extent that they are right now. I mean, we are really well developed, and who knows where we'll go in the next decade.
Right.
They were not developed at that time. Basic things that are just clear to you and me. Wait, this guy killed animals as a kid. He played violent games with his sister. He nearly killed his sisters on multiple occasions. He had a violent, horrific anger toward his mother. And eventually, you and I, looking at that on a rubric that we would use for gauging reoffense, would go, no, this guy is not ready to be released. That I'm pretty clear on that. So maybe it is about just the time that we're working in with the tools that we have right now. So speaking of tools, you have, so after you and I finished our internship, I went to a state prison. You stayed and worked for the forensic clinic.
Right.
That's
working with sex offenders.
Right, working with sex offenders and released from prison. You got really, really expert with those assessment tools. So can you tell me about that? Because that's off my skill set now.
Yeah. So kind of tying back into, with Kemper and what this mental health professional recommended based on their clinical judgment at the time. So with risk assessments, that's what we're doing. We're assessing risk. There's no predicting about what somebody's going to do in the future. The best we have is just assessing risk. And the way that I sort of tend to explain that to people is that it's very similar to how your car insurance company will assess your risk for getting into an accident. So if you meet certain criteria or have certain items that they can check off that put you at higher risk, if you are a male in your early 20s, if you drive a sports car, if that sports car is red, guess what? You're paying a higher premium because you check off those 3 boxes. You could have the most responsible 20-year-old with a red Corvette that is never going to get in an accident. But because their numbers say that guy is more likely than the next person.
And that's built on statistics, right?
It's totally built on statistics. Unfortunately, that person pays a higher premium. And so with offenders, and I'll just say, usually the things we're assessing for risk are violence and or sexual offending. With offenders, if we can tick off certain items, that's how we end up calculating if they are low, medium, or high risk for reoffense.
Okay.
So we're saying this person has these certain risk factors going on. This is what we're going to target in treatment to hopefully lower that risk. But it doesn't matter why they have these risk factors, they just have them. And so statistically, they're more likely to offend. So maybe we need to give that person more treatment. They need to be monitored more closely.
So you're talking about things, the ones that I do remember vaguely from when I was doing that internship and at state prison were issues around like a history of unstable relationships.
Yeah, so
that's a real important one. Or history of
if you weren't able to
substances.
be in a relationship for 2 years, then sorry, you got dinged.
Yeah.
Age. So, we know with all criminal behavior that criminals basically age out of engaging in that type of behavior. And so the younger you are, that works against you.
Much like the driver, much like the age. Right?
Exactly.
So they're probably looking at what they consider to be or they're not looking at what they consider. They're looking at statistically what comes along with being a young male, which is impulsivity.
Sure. Yeah. And just that inability to kind of build stability in whatever it is, relationships or good driving records.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of give a little piece about risk assessment for our audience.
Maybe we should do a half episode.
Maybe
one of these times about the assessments, because some of that stuff's very interesting, especially when we're looking at violent offenders versus sex offenders.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that there is violence there no matter what, but there are different branches about who will act, who will not act, and in what way they'll act out.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So upcoming episode.
Yay.
Okay. So when we look at the other serial killer that is featured pretty heavily in the first season, I'm putting it out there that they're going to have multiple seasons and get picked up. So I'm just going to call this the first season,
right?
Not the standalone season.
And this character is introduced in episode 7, which is my favorite epised of the season.
Well, we got to talk about why after I introduce him.
Okay.
So Jerry Brudos, born in 1939, he's another American serial killer and necrophiliac. Get both of them in the first season, and he killed, at least to their knowledge, or at least to our knowledge today, he had killed at least 4 women in Oregon between 1968 and 1969. So I'm actually convinced he killed more people because he was not upfront and open, and this is an incredibly narrow window of time for.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of other things that happened that he just never gave up.
Right.
He's from South Dakota. He's the youngest in the family, and folks, it's going to sound like we're always going to be pinning things on the mother, which is not fair, and we're going to talk about that being an issue in the history of psychology, is maligning mothers. In fact, there even used to be a term called the schizophrenogenic mother, who was sort of this.
God, I haven't heard that in a long time.
I know, because it's so archaic, but it basically was, well, it's not this poor guy's fault, it's his crazy mother who did all this to him, which is, we've found that to be all bullshit.
Moms, be good to your sons.
Yeah, exactly.
But not too good.
Yeah, not too good. Bad breast, good breast. A little attachment joke there to say.
Maybe you need to
object relations joke. Okay. But,
Google it.
But creepily enough, in the case of Jerry Brudos, his mother did want a girl. And so there was definitely, some mixed messages that were sent to him regarding gender and sexuality. And he was abused brutally. And just at age 5, this is something happened with him that I think we saw a lot when we were working with sex offenders, is that due to his characterological wiring, there was just a kink that occurred. And the kink was he developed a fetish for women's shoes. Right. And around that age, I think he was going through a dump. If it was like a garbage or something, he found a pair of women's heels,
which his mom did not wear.
Yeah, his mother did not wear them, and he became. I mean, he was immediately. It was like his sexualization of that image just, sort of exploded, fully formed.
Well, and maybe just the curiosity, because it was so different. I mean, if we're talking age 5,
Yeah.
less sexual, but just, what is this?
Yeah.
And
well,
then,
it became weird and sexual pretty quickly.
Right. But, knowing to hide it.
Right. He knew to hide it. He's tried to steal one of his teachers, a pair of her shoes.
But she didn't react adversely. Mom did. Eventually told him to get rid of them. He hid the shoes, and then Mom found them again and burned them in front of him. The teacher actually just asked him why he did it, and so he was getting these mixed messages from women.
So you got someone who is this harsh and negating female influence versus this sort of understanding and compassionate and curious, non-judgmental. That's kind of brutal for a little kid to try and understand and conceptualize the difference between those two approaches.
Right.
They just don't have the ability to.
Right.
But he also started exhibiting some other behaviors. He was stealing shoes and stealing underwear from neighborhood girls. He spent his teen years in and out of psychiatric hospitals. Started stalking women as a teenager. And by now, the shoe thing was fully formed, where he was either knocking women down or knocking them out and stealing their shoes and running away. So he abducted a young woman and beat her pretty badly when he was 17. Was put back into the state hospital. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia again. So clearly, this guy was not schizophrenic. I mean,
it's what's the worst diagnosis we can come up with because this person's such a monster?
I mean, but even then, they had the DSM. I mean, if we go back and look at the criteria for that diagnosis, he's still not meeting it. I mean, it's crazy behavior, but it's not that.
Right.
And so he got married when he got out of the hospital. He got married, got a job, married a 17-year-old. Very interesting how young he married. Had 2 kids, and asked his wife to engage in some what would be probably sexy behavior. Like
take photos of her
clean, naked, except for the heels. Do her housework, which outside of any other pathology would not be particularly notable. But in this case, it really seems like it's starting to escalate.
Sure.
So he ended up killing several women, dismembering them, keeping one of the feet in his freezer so he could try different shoes on it. I mean, it's pretty brutal. And again, had incredible arguments with his mother, like just incredible arguments with his mom. And he ended up in prison. When he was caught with this, unlike Kemper, he denied everything.
Yeah, very different than Kemper.
Very, Kemper was up front.
Although in the show, also portrayed as somebody fairly likable. He kind of messes with them a little bit. And I don't know how much of that.
I didn't like him at all.
Really? I did.
I didn't. I thought he would. I mean, I immediately had a visceral reaction that was very different from the Kemper character. So I think that's cool that we both had a different reaction.
Yeah, I liked that he kind of fucked with them a little bit and pretended like he was asleep when he started reading from this script, and then was like, "I'm just kidding with you guys," and
Okay, I'm a little worried about my podcast partner here, but let's move on.
He's so likable. So are you.
So likable. But there's also a really an intense scene that goes back to what we were talking about of maybe crossing the line in his interview technique. But Holden, he takes a chance and he does get information out of him and angers his colleagues in a big way.
Yeah, I don't know if that's why I like this episode so much, because there's so many lessons learned and things that we have to carefully consider when we're working with offenders. And the 2 that come to mind that were pretty evident is the use of self-disclosure.
Right.
And is that the scene you're talking about?
Yeah.
When Holden talks about that. And then this issue of countertransference. So self-disclosure, just talking about in a forensic setting. So how were you taught? What did you?
Well, I was taught two very different things. Okay. I mean, even before I would focused in forensics as a like I was saying earlier, as a marriage and family therapist, you want to listen, you want to engage. You don't necessarily want to be the old school psychotherapy approach of being a blank slate.
Right.
You want to be authentic in the room so that the person can come back. So you're careful about disclosure, but sometimes disclosure, especially when you're working like with a teenager, teenager, you're not going to get anything out of them unless you find some hook to connect on.
Right.
And then, but in my psychology training and my, doctoral training, that was de-emphasized. Sure. That was really, really de-emphasized. And then working in a forensic setting, it was even more so.
Degree.
But sometimes you have to. I mean, I got stuff out of my clients in prison by disclosing some things that were what I would consider to be half-truths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not enough to where they could find me on the internet, but...
Right. And what you have to always ask yourself and consider is if me sharing this information about myself is going to be useful to the therapeutic process. Right. Is it going to help them along somehow?
Or are you doing it to pump up your own ego, which unfortunately I think some more green clinicians, and I'll even admit I probably did it, I probably didn't use the best judgment when I was raw. I would never do
the time of, I had this other appointed therapist and all they do is sit there and talk about themselves. I don't say anything in the session and I'm just like, oh my God. But it's twofold. Even if you weren't working with a forensic population, the therapy session is not about you. It's about your client. So, it's keeping the focus in the right place. And then with the forensic population, it's why the heck would you give them information that they can manipulate or use against you or find you on the internet or, in worst case scenarios, look you up and come into contact with you outside of the therapeutic setting. So, the scene was really intense. Holden decides to share with Jerry Brudos a situation in which, his mom walked in on him masturbating. And so not only is it self-disclosure, but there's a sexual element to it.
Right. And his partner is horrified.
Completely horrified. I mean, he's an older character. I mean, just talking about masturbation is probably kind of weird, but the fact that he used it as a quote-unquote interview technique was really interesting.
And you know what else? We didn't really talk about this in the development of this series because we're talking about the two main characters, but Holden's girlfriend is key to him understanding a lot of the techniques that he's developed. And I mean, getting to the place where he develops these techniques because he is so concrete FBI and she's a sociology major. So she's like absolutely poking at the foundations of every perspective he has. And you have to give him credit because he goes, no, this is actually good stuff. I've never thought of that before.
Right. He's still young enough to say, okay, I'm open to.
And because it works for him, he ends up impacting the other guys that he's working with that go, oh, this stuff is working. Yeah. It seems like voodoo right now, but it's working.
I'm glad you brought up the girlfriend because it's such an interesting kind of coming back to Jerry and the shoes. And there's a scene where she has on these heels that they saw in a store together and
some black lingerie.
And Holden is completely distracted by it and can't engage in sexual behavior with his girlfriend because he's distracted by the shoes that are reminding him of Jerry. And I remember when we were in training and we were doing some training in our internship just about vicarious trauma and self-care and reading the statistics about people who work in the field with sex offenders, whether it's therapists, law enforcement, judges, attorneys, whomever, that there's a pretty good percentage of people whose sexual lives are impacted by their work.
Well, I would completely. I mean, some of the stuff that you and I read in criminal files. Of course,
how do you not think about that at some point?
You're trying to be intimate with the person you love, and you're like, ugh.
You're like, I just read a really bad report today.
Yeah, that's nice.
Instead of I have a headache, I read this terrible report today. But I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. The self-disclosure thing also kind of reminded me of like the overarching theme in Silence of the Lambs too, where it's like, hey, tell me about yourself and quid pro quo, to magnified, but
Clarice.
So countertransference is another psychology therapeutic concept that was really highlighted in this topic or in this episode. And I think it's most evident when they're talking to Jerry about how he came into some of his fetishes, and they start getting into the cross-dressing.
Right.
And that clearly hits a nerve with Tench, the older FBI agent. And countertransference essentially is this thing in psychology that you just have to be aware of what buttons of yours are touchy, or that you have a history with, or your own beliefs, morals, ideas about certain topics.
So what in you is getting triggered by what your client is giving you, because that's going to affect how you react to them, how you sit with them in the room. And if you're not marking your own, if you're not keeping yourself in line.
Right. Because we're people, right? So as therapists, we have all of those things. It can be, that your client, that some attribute about them reminds you of a relative of yours. It could be something like that, or it could be this visceral reaction to the concept of cross-dressing.
Well, he clearly, and the way it's played in that scene, here's this guy who has been, for 7 episodes now, he has been listening to absolutely horrific things by these serial killers, and he's awful acts of sex and awful acts of violence, and yet this is what hits him, as it hits him in his masculinity. Like the idea, like this, that he's sitting across from this really large sort of blue collar looking guy with a belly, and he's like, wait, this guy likes to dress up in women's clothes, and it knocks him for a loop. So much so that it affects the work. And so that's what we're talking about with countertransference, just triggers that resonate with you and things that kind of get under your skin. But then there's such a great line when they're leaving the prison, and he says to Holden, if what we're doing doesn't get under your skin, you're either more screwed up than I thought, or you're kidding yourself. And I think that's perfect. Absolutely. I think it's fantastic.
It just sums everything up.
And to tie it back to when he's having the intimate moment with his girlfriend, Holden, and she comes in and she's got on black heels and some black lingerie, and they start getting intimate, and at first he's like, you can tell he's overwhelmed and really into it, and then his hands go down and they touch the shoes, and then he gets distracted.
Right.
But he has this thing where instead of him owning his own shit about it, he actually kind of lashes out at his girlfriend. He goes, this isn't you.
Right.
And she comes back with this great line of, I know it's not me, but sometimes
that's the point.
That's the whole point, which is really, I mean, we could have a whole episode on human sexuality and how there's a whole spectrum of sexuality that our sort of Protestant values here in the West really want to tamp down. And it's the reason my private practice stays in business, is because people come to therapy to work out that stuff that, got so suppressed or repressed while they were growing up, or didn't get expressed in a healthy way.
Yeah, yeah.
So what I'm really thinking we're going to need to do is see if we can do another episode of LA Not So Confidential on this. I think there's a little bit more to be explored, but I don't want to give it away right now. What do you think about that?
Definitely. I think we're working on some really cool surprises related to Mindhunter.
Yeah.
So we're still in the sort of logistical stages, but to be continued, and we'll let you know about that. But I just think the show was great, and it's great in an entertainment way. It's also great in just it brought back a lot of memories of my own journey of starting to work with criminals, and the things that I went through and the things that we stumbled through, and still do. I mean, cases that just blow me away and catch me off guard and things like that. But that all comes down to just human nature, and there's no cookie cutter and there's no recipe for doing this, because we are all so different.
Yeah, the Ed Kemper thing, the way it ended, I thought was particularly, I don't know if it was a literary license, because it's a pretty dramatic ending.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something like, there's some controversy in what I've read about whether that actually happened at the time that it's portrayed happening. But basically, they do something really stupid, which you're not supposed to do at all, which is leaving an individual who is not an employee of the prison alone, with an inmate, especially someone who's so incredibly violent and incredibly
Well, he's like
physical.
in the hospital.
Yeah, he's in a
wing,
hospital
right?
setting, but I'm not really sure if that's actually what happened.
Yeah,
but that's
I
the
don't
way
know.
it's portrayed.
Right.
And our lead character comes very close to, getting killed, and it's devastating for him. I mean, he has a full-blown panic attack,
Right.
and it's a great way to end the series, and it's a great way to sort of wrap up. No, I didn't. Did I jinx it? I said end of series. No, they have to have another.
No.
It's end of season, because what we see is him really, actually, for the first time, running full headfirst into the wall of what he's actually doing, the danger of it. He's been able to compartmentalize it up until this time.
Yep.
And, the way that reflected in my experience in working in the state prison, because I was working on a really high security yard with what was called special needs. So it was people that had to be kept away from general population. And I had probably about 4 guys that were on my caseload over the years I was there that have been profiled on these television shows like Nightline. I can't identify them for anonymity's sake, but they were interesting in that these 4, I will never forget them, because they had that bravado that Ed Kemper had. They walk into the room. I mean, literally, my first day working with one of them, he walked in with this sort of saunter, and he goes, "You probably saw me on Forensics Files, didn't you?"
God.
And so, yeah, and then he goes into explaining that, like, oh, well, that's not really how it happened, and I didn't do that at all.
Celebrity.
Yeah, but he wanted to make sure that I knew about his, connections.
That he's a big deal.
Yeah, he's a big deal. So, that's it, folks. Thanks so much. This was a lot of information. We hope you were able to stick through it or take a break if it gets too heavy.
Yeah, I think this was a fun episode. I feel like it was a perfect mix of all the things we're trying to accomplish with this podcast.
Yeah, a little education and some gore.
Right.
So we've got some exciting things coming up in the next couple of weeks. And make sure to check us out on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram.
Right. And reach out if you have any topics or things you would like us to cover.
Yeah, we've got some great questions coming in that we'll address in our next episode. So have a great week, and we will see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye-bye, folks. Thanks.
Bye.